The Greek Interpreter's Story from Sherlock Holmes.
Throughout my long and intimate friendship with Sherlock Holmes, he had never spoken of his relatives, nor did he often allude to his past life. This remarkable reticence only served to strengthen the almost inhuman image I had formed of him. In time, I began to regard him as a being entirely unique of his kind, a brain without a heart. His intellect was dazzling, yet his emotions seemed correspondingly deficient. His aversion to women and his reluctance to form new friendships clearly reflected his cold nature. Yet even these traits were not as striking as his habit of diverting the conversation whenever his family was mentioned. I had come to believe that he must have been raised in an orphanage with no living relations, until one day he casually mentioned a brother, much to my astonishment. One summer evening, we were seated together, enjoying our tea and conversation. At one moment, we spoke of golf clubs. At another, we debated the causes of axial tilt, until our discussion drifted toward heredity and inherited traits. We began to consider how much of a person's character was shaped by genetics and how much by early education. For what you described, I remarked, your powers of observation and your ability to draw rapid conclusions must be the result of your own disciplined self-training. Holmes had sunk into deep thought. You are partly correct, he replied. My ancestors were country squires and lived accordingly. Yet I believe these abilities of mine may have come from my grandmother. She was the sister of the French artist Vernet. The artistic tendencies in my blood may simply have taken a different form in me. But how can you be certain it is hereditary? Because my brother Mycroft surpasses me in that respect. This was news of considerable importance. If there existed another man in England possessing such extraordinary faculties, why had neither the public nor the police heard of him? I suggested, half in jest, that Holmes himself must surely be the more capable, and that modesty alone prompted his claim. Holmes laughed at this notion. My dear Watson, said he, I do not share the view that modesty is a virtue. A logician must see things exactly as they are. To underrate oneself is as grave an error as to exaggerate one's abilities. Both impair sound judgment. If I say Mycroft's observational powers exceed my own, it is because I truly believe it, not out of modesty. Is he younger than you? No, 7 years my senior. Then why is he not famous? He is very well known in his own circle. And where might that be? At the Diogenes Club. I had never heard of such an establishment. Holmes, noting my expression, drew out his watch. The Diogenes Club is the strangest club in London, and Mycroft is the strangest man in it. He attends every day from 4:45 until 20 minutes past 8. It is now 6. If you care for a pleasant walk, I should be delighted to introduce you to these two remarkable individuals. 5 minutes later, we were on our way toward Regent's Circus. I know what you are thinking, Holmes continued. You wonder why Mycroft does not employ his abilities as a detective. The answer is simple. He cannot. But you said, I said his powers of observation and deduction surpass mine. If detective work consisted solely of sitting in an armchair and reasoning, he would be the greatest detective in the world. But it is not so simple. Mycroft lacks ambition and energy. Rather than exert himself to prove his conclusions correct, he prefers to let others remain in error. I have consulted him frequently. He has solved every case with perfect accuracy. Yet he is incapable of taking the practical steps required to present a case before a jury or magistrate. Then he is not a professional detective? No. For me, detection is a profession. For him, it is merely an intellectual exercise. He has a remarkable head for figures and audits the accounts of certain government departments. He lives in Pall Mall, walks to Whitehall each morning, and returns in the evening. Beyond that, he takes no exercise, except crossing the street to the Diogenes Club, which stands directly opposite his residence. I cannot say the name is familiar to me. That is hardly surprising. As you know, London contains many individuals who, from shyness or misanthropy, prefer to avoid social interaction. Yet even such people appreciate comfortable chairs and the latest journals. The Diogenes Club caters precisely to them. It is a haven for the most unsociable men in the city. Conversation is strictly forbidden in all rooms except the stranger's room. Any member who violates this rule 3 times is liable to expulsion. My brother is one of its founders. I myself find its atmosphere exceedingly soothing. By the time Holmes had finished, we had reached the entrance to Pall Mall at St. James's. He paused at a door near the Carlton, signaled for silence, and led me inside. As we walked, I glimpsed through a glass partition a spacious and luxurious hall filled with men absorbed in their newspapers. Holmes indicated a smaller room overlooking Pall Mall, then left me briefly, returning shortly with a man whom I took to be his brother. Mycroft Holmes was of a much heavier build than Sherlock, though broad in frame. His face bore the same sharp, thoughtful expression. In his pale gray eyes, there was the same inward-looking gaze I had often observed in Sherlock at moments of intense concentration. He extended a large hand, more like a seal's flipper than a human limb, and said, "Delighted to make your acquaintance, sir. Since you began publishing Sherlock's adventures, I hear his name everywhere. By the way, Sherlock, I had expected you to consult me last week regarding the Manor House case. It seems somewhat beyond you." Holmes smiled. "I solved it. Of course, it was Adams." "Precisely. I knew it from the outset." They seated themselves by the bow window overlooking the street. "There is no better vantage point for observing humanity," said Mycroft. "Look at these splendid specimens. For instance, the 2 men approaching us. The billiard marker and his companion." "Exactly. What do you make of the latter?" The 2 men had paused opposite the window. One had chalk marks on his jacket pocket. The other was a small, dark man, his hat pushed back, carrying several packages under his arm. "An ex-soldier," said Sherlock. "Recently discharged," added Mycroft. "Served in India. A non-commissioned officer. Artillery, I should say," Holmes concluded. "A widower. With a child. Children, my dear brother." "Oh, come now," I laughed. "Surely that is going too far." "Not at all," said Holmes. "A man of such bearing is clearly military. His sun-darkened skin suggests recent service in India. His boots indicate he has only lately left the army," said Mycroft. "He does not walk like a cavalryman. His hat, tilted to one side, and the uneven tanning of his forehead support that. A man of his build is unlikely to be an engineer. That leaves artillery. His morning attire suggests he has recently lost someone dear. As he is doing his own shopping, that person must have been his wife. The rattle he carries shows one child is very young, likely an infant. The woman probably died in childbirth. The illustrated book under his arm indicates at least one older child. At last I began to understand what Holmes had meant about his brother's superior abilities. After taking a pinch of snuff from a tortoiseshell box and dusting his coat with a large red silk handkerchief, Mycroft continued, "By the way, I have a case that might interest you. Most singular. A man has sought my advice, but I have neither the time nor the inclination to pursue it. I have formed certain conclusions, of course, but if you would care to hear the details." "With pleasure." Mycroft scribbled a note and rang the bell, handing it to a waiter. "I have sent for Mr. Malas," he explained. "He lives above me. A Greek gentleman, an interpreter by profession. He was quite at a loss and came to consult me. You shall hear the story from his own lips." Within minutes, a short, stout man entered. His olive complexion and jet black hair marked him as a Southerner, though he spoke excellent English. He greeted Holmes warmly, his eyes bright with relief at finding someone eager to hear his account. "I do not believe the police credit my story," he began, his voice tinged with distress, "because they have never encountered such a case. They think it impossible. But I cannot rest until I know what became of that unfortunate man, his face covered in sticking plaster." "I am listening," said Holmes. "Today is Wednesday," Mr. Malaz began. "The event I describe occurred 2 days ago, on Monday night. As you may know, I am an interpreter by profession. I speak many languages, almost all, and as my name suggests, I am Greek by birth. Naturally, most of my work involves Greek. For years, I have been the most sought-after Greek interpreter in London, well known in the hotels. I'm accustomed to being summoned at odd hours by foreigners in difficulty. So when, on Monday night, a well-dressed young man named Mr. Latimer called at my home and informed me that a carriage awaited, I was not surprised. He explained that a Greek acquaintance of his required assistance in a business matter, but spoke no English. The address was in Kensington, some distance away, and he appeared to be in great haste. He hurried me downstairs and into the carriage. I call it a carriage, though in my haste, I scarcely noted its type. It was larger than the usual cab, somewhat worn in its upholstery, yet still imposing. Mr. Latimer sat opposite me, and we proceeded through Charing Cross towards Shaftesbury Avenue. When we reached Oxford Street, I was about to remark that we seemed to be taking a circuitous route when his next action silenced me. He drew from his pocket a heavy, lead-weighted stick, swung it lightly as if testing its balance, then placed it beside him without a word. Next, he closed both windows. To my astonishment, I realized they had been papered over to prevent any view outside. "I regret depriving you of the view, Mr. Malaz," he said calmly, "but you will understand that I cannot allow you to know where we are going. It would not suit my purposes for you to revisit the location later." As you may imagine, this statement startled me greatly. The man was broad-shouldered and powerful. Even without the stick, I would have been no match for him. "Your conduct is most extraordinary, Mr. Latimer," I stammered. "You are aware that what you're doing is unlawful." "I have no doubt I am depriving you of your liberty," he replied, "but you will be compensated. Let me warn you, however, if you attempt to shout or play any tricks, you will pay dearly. No one knows where you are. This carriage is untraceable. Therefore, you would do well to remain quiet. I can do whatever I please with you." His tone was calm, yet his words chilled me to the bone. I sat in silence. Why had I been abducted in such a manner? Whatever the reason, resistance was futile. The wisest course was to wait and see what would follow. For nearly 2 hours we drove on. I had not the faintest notion where we were bound. At times, from the jolting, I could tell we were passing over rough country roads. At others, when the motion ran smooth, I assumed we were on pavement. Beyond that, I could gather nothing. The paper over the windows kept out what little light there might have been, and a blue curtain had been drawn across the glass in front. It was 7:15 when we left Pall Mall. When at last the carriage came to a stop, it was 10 minutes to 9. When a man opened the window, I was able to make out a low, arched entrance with a lamp burning above it. I was hustled out of the carriage so quickly that the door had already opened, and I found myself inside the house almost before I knew I had left the road. In that brief moment between carriage and doorway, I had a dim impression of grass and trees on either side of me. But whether we were on some private estate or in a village, I could not tell. The gas lamp burning indoors had been turned down so low that I could scarcely distinguish my surroundings. Even so, I saw that I stood in a fairly large hall with pictures hanging on the walls. By the faint light, I also caught sight of the man who had opened the door, broad-shouldered, short of stature, middle-aged, and shabbily dressed. When he turned toward us, the lamp fell across his face, and I saw that he wore spectacles. "Is this Mr. Harold Malaz?" he asked. "Yes." "Excellent. Excellent. Do not alarm yourself, Mr. Malaz. I'm sure we shall get on admirably. If you behave honestly with us, you will have no cause for regret. But if you attempt any trickery, we shall make you curse the day you were born." As he spoke, his voice rose and fell oddly, and between his words he kept breaking into little fits of laughter. For some reason, I found him even more dreadful than the other man. "What is it you want of me?" I asked, "only that you put a few questions to our Greek friend and interpret his answers. But mind this, do not presume to ask him anything beyond what you are told, or else," he began to giggle again, "we shall make you curse the day you were born." As he spoke, he opened a door and led me into a room. Though lit only by the dim glow of a half-turned lamp, it was plainly furnished in the utmost luxury. It was certainly a spacious chamber, and from the way my feet sank into the carpet, I could tell at once how richly it had been appointed. I caught sight of velvet chairs, a high mantelpiece of white marble, and in one corner of it something which I took to be a suit of Japanese armor. Directly beneath the lamp stood a chair, and the older of the two men motioned for me to sit. The younger man had gone out. A moment later he returned by another door, accompanying a man who walked slowly and wore a loose dressing gown. When he came nearer the light, I saw him more clearly, and what I saw filled me with horror. The man's face was deathly pale, and he had wasted away until he seemed little more than skin and bone. Yet the gleam in his prominent eyes showed that his spirit was stronger than his body. What struck me most was not merely his emaciation, but the fact that his face was crisscrossed with sticking plaster. His mouth, too, had been sealed with a broad strip of plaster. As the poor fellow sank into the chair, the older man called out, "Have you brought the slate, Harold? Have you loosened his hands? Good. Now, put the pencil in them. You will ask the questions, Mr. Malaz, and he will write the answers. Now ask him whether he is prepared to sign the papers." The man's eyes flashed fire. On the slate he wrote, in Greek, "Never." At the tyrant's bidding, I asked, "Is that your final answer?" "Only if I see her married in the presence of a Greek priest known to me." The man gave a wicked little laugh. "Then you understand what will happen to you. Do what you please." And so our strange interview continued, half spoken, half written. Again and again, I asked him whether he would yield and sign the documents. Each time I received the same fierce refusal. Then an idea occurred to me. At the end of every question, I began slipping in a few brief phrases of my own. At first, I added only harmless ones to test whether the men understood any Greek at all. When I became satisfied from their manner that they understood nothing of what I said, I resolved upon a more dangerous game. The exchange proceeded in this fashion. "Your obstinacy is useless. Who are you? It makes no difference. I am a stranger in London. Your freedom lies in your own hands. How long have you been here? Let come what may. 3 weeks. The property is no longer yours in any case. Why are you in such a wretched state? That may be, but it shall not be yours either. They're starving me. If you sign, you shall be released. What is this house? I will never sign. I do not know. Do not imagine that you help her by this. What is your name? I wish to hear it from her own lips. Crotides, you shall see her if you sign. Where are you from? Then we shall never meet again. Athens. With another 5 minutes, Mr. Holmes, I might have had the whole story from him under the very noses of those men. My next question might have made everything clear. But at that moment the door opened and a woman entered. I did not see her well, but I could make out that she was tall and handsome, and that she wore a loose house gown. In broken English, she said, "Harold, I can bear being apart from you no longer. It is so lonely upstairs, and I only... Good God, this is Paul." The last words she uttered in Greek. At once the man made a desperate effort, tore the plaster from his lips, and cried out, "Sophie, Sophie," as he sprang toward her. But they were allowed only the briefest embrace, for the younger man at once seized the woman and dragged her from the room, while the elder one hauled the poor prisoner out through the other door. For one instant I was left alone, and I thought of rising to explore the house. Yet when I lifted my head, I found the older man already standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed upon me, and I congratulated myself that I had remained where I was. "That will do, Mr. Maylaws," said he. "As you perceive, we have entrusted you with a most private matter. Had our Greek friend not been obliged to leave us, we should never have troubled you. But we required another man, and you were recommended to us." I bowed. He stepped toward me. "Here are 5 sovereigns," said he. "I fancy they will suffice for your services." He touched me lightly on the chest and gave his little laugh. "If you mention this business to a single soul, yes, to a single soul, it will be the worse for you. I cannot describe to you the loathing that despicable creature inspired in me." The lamp was now full upon his face, so that I could observe him more clearly. His complexion was pale, his beard thin and pointed. When he spoke, he thrust his head forward. His lips and eyelids twitched incessantly, as if with some nervous disorder. Indeed, seeing his face as I did then, I could not help thinking that his perpetual giggling sprang from disease rather than mirth. In his cold steel-gray eyes, there was something unspeakably cruel. "If you speak of this to anyone," he said, "we shall know it. We have our own methods of obtaining information. Now you may return to the carriage. My friend will take you back." I was hurried out once more. As I left the house and stepped toward the carriage, I again caught a fleeting glimpse of trees and garden. Mr. Latimer was close behind me. We resumed our seats opposite one another, and throughout the long return journey, not a word was spoken. Once again, the windows were shut tight, and the drive seemed endless. At last, a little after midnight, the carriage came to a halt. "You will get down here, Mr. Maylaws," said the man. "I regret leaving you so far from home, but I have no choice. If you attempt to follow the carriage, you will regret it." As he spoke, he opened the door, and I stepped quickly out. No sooner had my feet touched the ground than the coachman's whip cracked, and the carriage sped away into the darkness. I found myself standing alone upon a road bordered by low bushes. In the distance, I could see a row of houses with lights burning in their upper windows. Looking the other way, I noticed the red signal lamps of a railway line. The carriage had already disappeared. I was peering about, trying to determine where I was, when I saw a figure approaching through the dark. As he drew nearer, I perceived that he was a porter from the station. "Excuse me," I said, "where am I?" "Wandsworth Common," said he. "Is there a train from here into town?" "You'll have to walk as far as Clapham Junction, about a mile or so. If you hurry, you may still catch the last train to Victoria." And thus my adventure came to an end, Mr. Holmes. I have told you everything I know, where I was taken, whom I saw, what passed between us. I am convinced that something monstrous is afoot, and I wish to help that unfortunate man if I can. The next morning, I told the whole story first to Mr. Mycroft Holmes, and afterwards to the police. For some moments after this singular narrative, there was silence. Then Sherlock Holmes turned to his brother. "Any developments?" Mycroft took up the Daily News, which lay upon the table, and read aloud. "A reward will be paid to any person who can give information concerning the whereabouts of Paul Crawtides of Athens. He does not speak English. A similar reward will be paid for information concerning a Greek lady named Sophie. The notice has appeared in every paper, but nothing has come of it. Did you learn anything from the Greek embassy? I inquired. They know nothing. Did you wire the head of police in Athens? Mycroft turned to me. All the energy in the family has been concentrated in Sherlock, said he. I think you had better take the case in hand and keep me informed of any progress. Sherlock Holmes rose to his feet. Certainly, I shall keep both you and Mr. Maloz informed. Mr. Maloz, meanwhile, if I were you, I should take precautions. Once they see the newspaper advertisements, they will know it was you who betrayed them. As we walked home together, Holmes stopped at the post office and sent off several telegrams. You see, Watson, said he, our evening walk has not been wasted. Some of my most interesting cases have come to me through my brother. There can be only one explanation of this extraordinary affair. Are you hopeful of solving it? With so much already in our possession, it would be strange if we could not. You must, from what you have heard, already have formed some theory of your own. I have the outline of one. Let me hear it. It is perfectly plain that the Greek lady has been carried off by a young Englishman named Harold Latimer. But where was she carried off from? From Athens, perhaps. Holmes shook his head. The man does not speak a word of Greek, whereas the woman's English, though broken, is by no means poor. The obvious conclusion is that he has never been to Greece, but that she has been in England for some time. Then we may suppose that she came to England on a visit, and that this Harold fellow induced her to run away with him. That is more probable. In that case, the woman's brother, assuming they are indeed related, came over from Greece in search of her. Through some imprudence, he fell into the hands of these men. The reason they are detaining him and using violence may be that control of the woman's fortune depend upon him. When he refused to sign the necessary papers, they first employed another interpreter, and then Mr. Maloz. The woman herself had no idea her brother was in the house, and only discovered it by chance that evening. Excellent, Watson, Holmes cried. You are very near the mark, I think. As you see, all the cards are in our hands. Our only fear is that harm may already have come to someone, but if they do not act too quickly, we may yet take them. But how are we to find the house? If, as we suspect, the lady's name is Sophie Crawtides, it should not be difficult to trace her. Our best hope lies with the woman, for the man is a stranger here. Clearly there is some history between Harold and Sophie, some weeks, perhaps. However long it has been, we know it was sufficient time for her brother in Greece to learn of matters and come to England. If during that time Harold and Sophie have been living together anywhere, then I am confident someone will answer Mycroft's advertisement. By the time we reached our rooms in Baker Street, Holmes was still speaking. He mounted the stairs ahead of me, but the instant he opened the door, he stopped short in astonishment. Looking past his shoulder, I found myself no less surprised. Mycroft was seated comfortably within, smoking his pipe. He smiled at our bewildered expressions and, with perfect composure, said, "Come in, Sherlock. Pray come in, sir. You did not imagine me capable of so much exertion, did you? Yet this case has somehow managed to interest me." "How did you get here?" Holmes demanded. "I passed you in a cab. Any fresh development?" "There has been an answer to the advertisement." "What?" "Yes. It arrived a few minutes after you left." "And what does it say?" Mycroft drew a sheet of paper from his pocket. "Here it is," said he, "written on first-rate cream paper in A.J. nib by a man of middle age and delicate constitution. It reads as follows. I know very well the lady mentioned in your advertisement in today's paper. If you will do me the favor of calling upon me, I can furnish you with the particulars of her melancholy history. At present, she is at the Myrtles, Beckenham. You'll fit foudy, J. Davenport. The letter was posted from Lower Brixton. What do you say, Sherlock? Shall we go at once and hear these particulars for ourselves? I think the life of the imprisoned man is of greater importance than the lady's history, said Holmes. We ought to go straight to Scotland Yard, take Inspector Gregson with us, and make for Beckenham without delay. The man's life is in danger. There is not a moment to lose. We had better pick up Mr. Maylaws on the way, I suggested. We may need an interpreter. An excellent thought, said Sherlock Holmes. Tell the servant to fetch a cab at once. As he spoke, I observed him open the drawer of the table and slip his revolver into his pocket. Seeing that I had noticed it, he said, "Yes, from what we have heard, we are dealing with a very dangerous gang." By the time we reached Pall Mall, darkness had almost settled. Mr. Maylaws was not at home. He had gone out only a short time before in the company of gentlemen who had called for him. Do you know where he went? Mycroft asked the woman who answered the door. No, sir, she replied. I only know that he got into a carriage with a gentleman. Did the gentleman give his name? No, sir. Was he a tall, handsome, dark young man? No, sir. He was a small gentleman with a thin face and spectacles. He had a very pleasant manner. He was always laughing when he spoke. We must go at once. Holmes cried suddenly. The affair is getting out of hand. And as we drove toward Scotland Yard, he said, they have kidnapped Maylaws again. That night, they cannot have realized how physically timid the poor fellow was. The moment he saw that man again, he must have been paralyzed with terror. They clearly still need an interpreter, but this time, once their business is done, they will kill him, for they will regard the newspaper advertisement as an act of betrayal. We had hoped to reach Beckenham by train at the same time as, or even before, our adversaries. But our visit to Scotland Yard, finding Inspector Gregson and obtaining the official authority required to enter the house, cost us nearly an hour. It was 10:15 when we reached London Bridge, and 10:30 by the time we stepped onto the platform at Beckenham. After a drive of about a mile, we arrived at the Myrtles, a large, gloomy house standing apart upon its own grounds some distance from the road. There is not a light in the place, said the inspector. It looks deserted. The birds have flown and emptied the nest before going, said Holmes. How do you know that? A heavily laden cart passed this way about an hour ago. I saw the wheel ruts in the light of the carriage lamps, said the inspector. But how do you know it was heavily laden? You must have noticed that the tracks run in both directions. But the ruts coming away from the house are much deeper. Clearly, they took a considerable load with them. The inspector shrugged. You have seen a little more than I have, Mr. Holmes. In that case, gaining entry may not be easy. But if no one answers, we shall have to force it. He hammered loudly with the knocker and rang the bell, but there was no response. Holmes had disappeared, but in a minute or two he returned. I have opened one of the windows, said he. When the inspector saw with what neat skill my friend had manipulated the latch, he remarked, It is fortunate for us, Mr. Holmes, that you are on our side of the law and not the other. I suppose we need not wait for an invitation. One after another we enter the house. This, beyond all question, must have been the place to which Mr. Maylaws had been brought. When the inspector lit his lantern, we saw the two doors, the curtain, and the Japanese armor Mr. Maylaws had described. On the table stood 2 glasses, an empty brandy bottle, and the remains of a meal. What is that? Holmes asked suddenly. We all stood still and listened. From somewhere above us there came a faint, muffled moaning. Holmes darted into the passage. The weak sound came from an upper floor. He sprang up the staircase at once, with the inspector and myself close behind him. Mycroft followed as fast as his heavy build would allow. On the second floor we found 3 doors. The sound, which at times sank into an indistinct murmur and at others rose into a shrill cry, came from the middle one. The door was locked, but the key had been left in it. Holmes turned it and rushed inside, only to reel out again with his hand at his throat. Coal burning in there, he gasped. Wait a moment. The fumes will clear a little. When we looked in, we saw that the only light in the room came from a wavering blue flame in a brass brazier set in the middle of the floor. Its ghastly glow cast a pale, unnatural ring upon the boards. In the shadows beyond, huddled against the wall, we could make out two bodies. The smoke that rolled out through the doorway made breathing difficult, and though we coughed violently, we could still exchange a few broken words. Holmes ran to the head of the stairs for a gulp of cleaner air, then dashed back in, seized the burning brazier, and hurled it through the window into the garden. Coming out again, half choking, he said, In another minute we may go in. Where's the candle? I doubt we could strike a match in there. Hold the light by the door. We shall go in and carry them out. Come, Mycroft, now. We threw ourselves into the poisoned room, reached the men, and dragged them at once into the brighter hall below. Neither was conscious. Both had purple lips, swollen faces, and eyes bulging hideously from their sockets. Their features were so disfigured that, had it not been for his stout build and black beard, we might never have recognized the Greek interpreter with whom we had sat in the Diogenes Club only hours before. His hands and feet were tightly bound, and above one I was the mark of a heavy blow. The other man had likewise been bound. He was tall, gaunt, and wasted to the bone, with his face still covered in strips of sticking plaster. Once we laid him down, his groans ceased entirely. One glance was enough to show me that for him all aid had come too late. Mr. Maylaws, however, was still alive, and in less than an hour, with the help of ammonia and brandy, I succeeded in bringing him back to consciousness. I had managed to pull him back from the very edge of the abyss. The story he told us was simple and confirmed our own conclusions in every particular. The man who had come for him had drawn a pistol the moment he entered the house, and thus carried him off the second time. The giggling fiend had inspired such terror in poor Mr. Maylaws that even the mention of him caused his face to blanch and his hands to tremble. Maylaws had been taken in haste to Beckenham, and once more forced to serve as interpreter. This time the interview had been more violent. The imprisoned man had been threatened with death unless he complied at once with their demands. When at last they understood that no threat would bend him, they had locked him up again. Mr. Maylaws, meanwhile, was accused of having betrayed them through the newspaper advertisements. He remembered being struck on the head with a stick and then seeing us standing over him as he lay upon the floor. Of all that had happened in the interval, he knew nothing. Thus ended this singular adventure of the Greek interpreter, though there remained certain points that were never entirely cleared up. When we later got into communication with the man who had answered the advertisement, he furnished us with information concerning the abducted woman. According to his account, she was the daughter of a wealthy Greek family, and while visiting friends in London, had made the acquaintance of a young man named Harold Latimer. He succeeded in winning her affections and persuading her to run away with him. Her friends were thrown into the utmost consternation, though they could do little beyond informing her brother in Athens. When that brother came to London, he imprudently fell into the trap laid by Latimer and his associate, a man named Wollstonecraft. Unable to speak the language, the poor fellow was left utterly helpless in the hands of his enemies. By torture and starvation, Latimer and Wilson sought to force him to sign papers relinquishing, in their favor, both his own rights and those of his sister to the family property. The woman herself had no idea that her brother was being confined in that house. The reason they had plastered his face with so many strips was to prevent her from recognizing him should she happen to see him. Yet while the Greek interpreter was there, Sophie, with the instinct of a woman and a sister, recognized him at a glance despite the bandages. The poor girl herself, however, was also virtually a prisoner in the house, for no one lived there save the coachman and his wife, and both were entirely in the service of Latimer and Kemp. Once the villains realized that their secret had been exposed, they fled the rented house with all speed, taking the girl with them and believing they had administered fitting punishment both to the man who had resisted them and to the one who had betrayed them. Some months later, an interesting newspaper cutting arrived from Budapest. It told of the tragic end of two Englishmen who had been traveling with a woman. The Hungarian police believed that the men had stabbed one another to death in the course of a quarrel. Holmes, however, had, I think, another opinion on the matter. Should the Greek lady ever be found, it might one day be learned in what fashion she avenged the wrongs done to herself and to her brother.